Dr. Crystal Marule, and I come before you as a concerned parent and citizen deeply invested in the educational integrity of our schools. The decision to include books like My Maddy in our elementary school libraries, as recommended in Dr. Jackson's order, is very concerning. Her order contains no accurate references to my evidence or the arguments I presented in opposition to this book. It is almost as if she were not even present at the hearing. Her recommended order ignores my arguments and violates my parental rights to proffer evidence of my objection to you, the school board. In the limited time I have, I cannot summarize all the evidence I presented previously. However, I have provided you with copies of my detailed opening and closing statements from the hearing. The inclusion of transgender books like My Maddy is part of a disconcerting pattern of decisions made without adequate parental input. These books promote a gender perspective that many parents, including myself, find deeply troubling and highly inappropriate. The potential for irreversible damage to young developing minds is too great a risk to ignore. Briefly, let me address the arguments that the district has laid out to defend these texts. 1, they are age-appropriate based on peer reviews. The peer reviewers of these books are not experts. The only requirement to become a peer reviewer is to be familiar with books and libraries. Additionally, they are not necessarily from Florida and certainly are not trained on Florida criteria for book selection. Lastly, there is a financial incentive for positive reviews. Reviewers are paid 3 times as much for a positive review than for a negative review, and they are warned that rejections should be rare. 2, the Parnell case and the LGBTQ settlement with the state allow for these books. Both the Parnell case and the recent settlement make the point that HB 1557 and 1069 do not govern library book selection, curation, and retention. That is correct. The applicable statute is 1006.28, upon which I have based my challenges. Furthermore, the Parnell case makes it quite clear that library books are not instruction. They are government speech, not free speech. The First Amendment is not a sword activists may use to compel the government to speak for them. Library books must supplement the educational mission of the state. Therefore, the statutes and media training insist that books must align with and support state standards and curriculum. Though the settlement does allow for incidental references of LGBTQ characters in instructional texts, the characters in the texts I am challenging are anything but incidental. They are the main characters, and the whole point of the book is to promote transgenderism. Additionally, it is abundantly clear from the statutory language that sex should be presented as binary and immutable, and to attribute non-binary pronouns is false. Thus, under no objective application of the state statutes can one find these books to be appropriate. 3, there is a court injunction against the pronoun clause. Ms. Siegel at the most recent hearing argued that there is a temporary injunction issued against applying the Florida statute that states, "It shall be the policy that a person's sex is an immutable biological trait and that it is false to ascribe to a person a pronoun that does not correspond to such person's sex." She implied this injunction is statewide and thus the district is not beholden to follow the law. This is not correct. A limited injunction was given to one of the complainants while the case is pending judgment. Just because someone sues the state, the law is not invalidated. It would be ill-advised to follow that line of advice. The law currently stands, and you are at risk for penalties if you violate it. 4, gender ideology and gender-affirming care are widely accepted. During the hearing, Dr. Ream asserted that transgender ideology is widely accepted and non-controversial. Yet, recent developments paint a starkly different picture. The recently leaked files from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, the WPATH, unveil a troubling scenario where clinicians influential in shaping global gender medicine openly discuss improvising treatments. This revelation is alarming as it suggests a deviation from the stringent norms of evidence-based medicine. Furthermore, the recent CAST report, an independent review commissioned by the National Health Service of England, further critiques these practices, highlighting a concerning circularity in citations within the field. This review underscores the critical gaps in the evidence base for gender-affirming care and questions the enthusiastic endorsement of social transitions for children. Some experts have observed this may be the greatest medical fraud in history, on par with lobotomies and eugenics. In response, England's NHS has banned hormone treatments and surgeries for transgender minors. Such measures signal a reevaluation of practice that should give us a real pause about reading content. That should give us pause about the reading content we endorse in schools. This critique of transgender ideology is further validated by discussions in major media outlets like the New York Times and findings from long-term studies recently published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior. Even the Pope weighed in last week, quote, "The sex of a person at birth is an irrevocable gift from God, and any sex change intervention risks threatening the unique dignity the person has received from the moment of conception. In the recently published book, The Queering of the American Child, the authors warn that queer activists are obsessed with schools. They know that if they can control the schools, they can brainwash future generations to root out and eliminate all normalcy in society. Parents and educators must understand what queer theory is doing to their children. Queer activists know that parents will end the madness the second they realize their children are in danger, which is why queer activists intentionally subvert parental authority. In light of this, to argue that transgenderism is non-controversial seems not only misleading but potentially harmful. We risk implicating our educational system in an ideological narrative that is not only contested on scientific grounds but also fraught with ethical complications. 5. All books are good for promoting reading. Ms. Siegel has stated any library book that encourages a child to read voluntarily is beneficial, and Ms. Duval in the recent Main Street article stated, every book on our shelves belongs there and should stay there. In addition, the activist group that has been colluding with them to undermine my parental rights, which I can document, the Florida Freedom to Read, recently posted, quote, we do not believe any book should be restricted from its author-intended audience. This is the most naive or malevolent argument I have heard throughout this entire charade. Of course some books are inappropriate for children. Just because someone writes something and wants your kid to read it doesn't mean they should. This flies in the face of any common sense we once had as a society. Certainly we don't want our kids to read a book that celebrates the KKK or teaches them how to shoot up a school, make a bomb, or sell drugs without getting caught. And certainly we don't want them reading books like The Kid by Sapphire that graphically depicts a 12-year-old raping a young child. Do we? I sure don't, but I should ask, do you? You haven't removed that book, even though Mr. Edward was interrupted multiple times while reading it at the last board meeting. Per Florida statutes, it should have been removed. And yes, he did meet all the required criteria. He submitted the official challenge form. He is a parent in the district. He is a father of 5 children. That book should be removed immediately. It is not a good book. 6, if a parent doesn't want a child to read a certain book, they can restrict their child's access. A parent should not have to restrict their child's access to books that don't meet the selection criteria in the first place. But to be compliant early on, I did submit a request to limit my son's access to any book that does not meet the criteria. Second, central to my challenge of the book Melissa was that it introduces my child to the idea of pornography and dirty magazines. I was told the media specialist would work with me to limit my child's access to such content. Yet the response to my request for such titles was, quote, we cannot do that level of query. So you tell me, how am I supposed to individually limit my child's access to books that reference pornography? Why should I even have to be concerned about him learning about pornography from a school book? He is 7 years old. This is insane. And what about my 2 kids in high school? Will you send me a list of all the titles that contain pornography and sexually explicit content? You seem to have hundreds of them, and everyone I have challenged has been removed, so obviously they violate the law. So maybe they shouldn't be purchased in the first place. And perhaps you should audit your libraries for such texts and remove them yourself. This should not be the parent's job. Furthermore, I must address the conduct of certain district staff members who have consistently opposed parental input. As an American, I have learned that when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce us under absolute despotism, it is our right and our duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for our future security. The history of the present district administrators is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all have an indirect object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over us, the parents. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. That 1, with little or no notice, hearing policies and procedures have been changed and unchanged. After the first hearing, my right to present evidence without interruption or unreasonable time constraints was taken away. After the second hearing, my right to call as a witness a specific school employee was denied based on a frivolous excuse of birthday plans. After the third hearing, my right to call elementary school staff as witnesses was removed. After the fourth, my right to call any district staff and cross-examine was taken away. And now I wonder what will be taken away from me next. Will my right to speak be taken away? I won't be surprised. Each one of these changes of policy and infringements of my rights was a unilateral decision that made outside of the Sunshine Law. And the justification recently given was a malicious and slanderous accusation that I had been threatening district employees and causing them harm. I have demanded an apology from Ms. Siegel for this, as she is violating the district harassment and anti-bullying policies. Lastly, I am requesting that the board table the vote on this recommended order so that they can have an appropriate time to evaluate all the evidence and argumentation that I did present and which was not properly presented in Dr. Bessie Jackson's order.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Olivia Haley.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
As you may recall, the district has 10 minutes to rebut her argument,
Okay, so
and then it's open for the board, the chair, the public comment. So Ms. Haley is not,
Okay.
it's not appropriate
Wait,
for her to
Ms.
speak
Taylor.
at this point.
Not this, I'm gonna go, I'll come back to you, just a minute. Go ahead, Ms.
Okay. This is
Siegel.
the book that was objected to. It's called My Maddy. It's a book that's in the library. It's not an instructional text. The back tells you what the book is really about. Some of the best things in the world are not one thing or the other, but entirely their own. The book is about gender identity. And the only statement in the book that even references anything that has to do with gender is the very first statement, very first page, beautifully illustrated. Most mommies are girls, most daddies are boys, but lots of parents are neither a boy or a girl, like my Maddy. And then it goes on in the book to talk about a number of things that are not one thing or quite the other. For example, hazel eyes sometimes look green, sometimes look brown, sometimes a little like both, and sometimes completely different. Some people have hair with a lot of blonde in it, but also a lot of brown. And the little girl wonders why they don't have a word like hazel for hair. Sunrise is beautiful. It is neither night, but it is not day. And a rainbow, that is between a rainy day and a sunny day. Some of the best things in the world are not one thing or the other, but are entirely fantastically their own. That's what this book is about, and it is not something that's taught in class. And I will continue stating that any time you can get a child to read, it is beneficial to that child's education. The criteria for removing a book from the library shelf is not whether it's got content about gender identity or not. It is not pornographic, so it fails the first test. It is not have inappropriate sexual content, so it fails the second test. It is suited for student needs and their ability to understand. That is the third criterion, and it is appropriate for the grade level and the age group for which it is available. It passes all 4 of those criteria. The state of Florida recently clarified its position on gender identity or sexual orientation in terms of teaching in the classroom. The statute clearly does not permit teaching, but the state of Florida, and stated in this is our position, and we will send it to all the counties for all the principals to know, that the statute, the word instruction on gender identity is instruction that it occurs in a classroom setting. But it limits the teaching of an overview of modern gender theory. It limits teaching a particular view of marital equality, but it does not limit the mere discussion of sexual orientation or gender identity. The statute would leave teachers free to respond to students' discussion or questions, to provide grades and feedback, to answer questions about their family, to have incidental references in literature to gay or transgenders, and it would instruction on this is the interesting statement from the state, instruction on the normalcy of opposite sex attraction would equally be instruction on sexual orientation and not allowed. They also said it would violate the statute to instruct children that heterosexuality is superior or that gender identity is immutable based on biological traits. This is what the state has said is their position. More importantly, in this settlement agreement, the state says library books without more are not classroom instruction. If it is acceptable for a teacher to discuss gender identity or sexual orientation in the classroom, it is certainly acceptable for a library book to contain issues about gender identity. Those statements are the law in Florida. Crystal Rule would have you ignore what the state of Florida says, the proper way to treat this statute is, and go with it because of a training course she took and because she believes differently. She is well entitled to believe anything she wants. But our position is she's not entitled to tell every other parent what they should be teaching. It is true that she did say to us at some point, do not let my child read anything that doesn't comply with the state standards. The very problem with that is, it's very clear now, this is the fourth hearing we've had, I think, that we have very different views of what state standards are. If Crystal Rule would not like us to have her child read My Maddy, she just has to tell us, and we will not do that. But we will not try to guess what she thinks violates state standards by just saying, don't let them read anything that does that, because we disagree. We would request that Dr. Jackson, and you've read, you can read all of the stuff that Dr. Merle has sent in. Dr. Jackson has been here a long time, has got a PhD herself, and a master's in library science. She's well qualified to make this decision, and it's the recommendation of the district that the board accept and adopt her opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Siegel. Olivia Haley.
The book My Maddy discusses themes that will thoroughly confuse children about the nature of men, women, and families. The age in which this book is aimed is not cognitively developed enough to understand the differences between girls and boys, let alone people who claim to be non-binary or anything in between. It does not matter if the book is designed with pictures, visuals, or language that is simplified for children. It is the content and general ideas that are too mature and confusing for children. Many parents and community members across the state are sick and tired of the schools providing literature that is not academically suitable for children. Just the other week in Hillsborough County, parents fought their school board about literature with the graphic sexual content and inappropriate literature for their children's age. The Wall Street Journal just reported last week that over 4,000 books have been deemed legitimately inappropriate and have been taken off the shelves due to parent complaints, making this a significant problem within the U.S. education system, not just a few people here in Alachua County. All the school's defense here so far is to create emotional arguments filled with a bunch of word salad nothing in order to defend keeping inappropriate literature for children available in any way to the students. I have asked fellow classmates at UF who attended Alachua Public Schools what they thought about these books. They told me that they were taught books with such sexual, graphic content at Gainesville High School that they hid them from their parents when they had to take them home, the books home to do homework, because they knew if their parents would find out, they would flip a lid. Why can't education go back to perfecting reading, writing, professional mathematical skills, and focusing on how to expand our ideas and search for interest and knowledge in the world? All this talk about providing resources for the students and all the tears tonight, yet look at the stats of your schools. At the A. Quinn Jones School, only 10% of the student population is proficient in math and 10% is proficient in reading. At Gainesville High School, 55% can read proficiently and 29% can do math proficiently, similar at Eastside High School.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. Bob Edward.
I just have a question why they're getting 2 minutes when the teachers got 3 minutes.
Did we do 3 minutes for the teachers?
Yes, you did.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Initially, a couple of the teachers did receive 3 minutes, and that was an error on my part, and the subsequent teachers did receive 2 minutes.
Should be 2 at this time.
If I may answer, I'd love to answer your question. It's subsequent to board policy 21. That was the 3
Right.
minutes, but it was an error on my part.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Edward, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. About 9 weeks ago, I started assisting Dr. Crystal Marule on these book objections, and it's truly been an eye-opener. I couldn't figure out why Ms. Siegel, Ms. Duvall, possibly Mr. Andrew and his assistant, hate her so much. But we put all the pieces together. And this lady sitting in the front row here, she represents an LGBTQ activist group who has fed information to Siegel, suggestions and so forth. We've documented interactions
Please
between
don't
them.
point people out.
and
Just keep
have-
your comments to us.
Would you not interrupt me, ma'am?
Just letting you know, don't point at people that's here, just to keep it clean. We've had a great night. I'm going to give you your time, but I want us to be respectful of one another.
Give me my
okay?
time back then.
I will. Go ahead. Keep talking. I got it.
All right. So what I've discovered, I'm a retired attorney. I turned 81 this month. I got better things to do with my life. I represented the city of Hawthorne for 17 years, so I'm familiar with this environment. But I have never seen such a cabal going on between LGBTQ activists and your staff attorney and Duval. I mean, we have documented it. And so why are they so upset that we have a change of governor, we have a change of legislature, we have laws passed, and it's very simple. Library books are government speech. They support the educational mission. The government does not support sex changing. It doesn't support discussion of gender identity through the 8th grade. So there's no way that government would speak in any of these books. It's that simple. We don't have to look at those criteria. The state of Florida does not promote gender fluidity, queer theory, gender-affirming care, any of it. So these books shouldn't be in the library, and you should be removing them. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries.